Hello, Agorians. I wanted to make a quick video for presenting to you the exciting new things that are coming to the wiki and to Agora in general, and to make some sort of walkthrough tutorial, if you like, on how some of the new things work and where you can find the information that you need. And also to explain the goals behind the changes. The first thing we are trying to achieve is bringing some clarity. The old wiki was, honestly speaking, a mess. It was a dump of information, a sitemap basically. We were consistently and persistently getting the feedback that it was overwhelming. People that were approaching Agora that were completely new to the fields of public speaking or leadership or public speaking clubs, they didn't know where to start. And that applied even to new members of veteran clubs. They were lost. Okay, now I'm a member of Agora. What do I do now? What should be my first step? Another thing we're trying to address is to have a structure that provides a lot of flexibility for growth, because we're not keeping static. We're not staying in the same place. In the last, for example, 6 months, I think we have introduced about 7 different new sections and probably about the same number or even more rows. And it was becoming difficult to understand and to find what were the possible options for having a meeting, what sections existed, what roles existed, which section required what, and that led many clubs not to experiment or use those sections at all, especially clubs that are coming from other places or that are trained in a different system. And it was a pity, because if you're not having those sections in your meetings, you are missing a lot, because they are very educational, they are very fun, they are every club that has tried them, we always get the same feedback that they become very popular. And it was a pity that it was so difficult to find, first, the fact that there were new sections possible that you could use, and second, how those sections work. A third goal that we're trying to achieve is making the wiki more easy for translations. Before, there was a lot of redundancy everywhere in the wiki, even some contradictory information. Now everything is much more streamlined, and thanks to that, hopefully within the next months, we will be deploying up to 10 new languages in the wiki in an automated way. And a final goal that we're trying to achieve, of which you will only see the seed in this particular wiki, is providing clubs with a set of tools that will allow you to generate personalized materials without you having to have specific software installed online and in an automated way. Because yes, we do have a brand portal, we have a lot of digital assets, we have templates for just about anything, but it's always the same thing. People usually tell us, but I'm not a graphic designer expert. I don't have Photoshop. I don't know how to work with GIMP. I'm really not an expert. And unless I have a designer, I really cannot make good use of all these templates. So what we're trying to do here, and as I mentioned, you'll see only the beginning of that. We'll develop it a lot more in the future, is providing you with a set of tools that will do all that generation personalization for you. You just input the basic data on the wiki, and the system gives you a finished file, agenda, business card, evaluation card that you can directly print, and that is already customized for your club. Now, in terms of organization, this will be the front page for the wiki. You will still have the access to the old page if you liked it so much, but I believe this is much more organized, in the sense that if you're a new member, you know that your area of interest is not everything that is shown, but just these 3 new items. Once you are, and they teach you what to learn about Agora, how to start, what your first steps in a club should be, which roles to take at the beginning, etc. That information was very lacking, because we were getting a lot of feedback as well in terms of, okay, I'm a member of a club, I'm a new member, now what happens next? It is true that part of that responsibility of orienting new members belongs to the clubs, but it is also true that many clubs are so new, they are freshly chartered, they don't really themselves understand completely how the system works. So it is a shared responsibility in the end, and we have to step up and provide some kind of guidance. Once you become a seasoned member, a regular member, if you like, once you're past that initial new member phase, again, your focus's interest is basically limited in general to this part of the wiki, club members. And you have meeting activities, meeting roles, and the educational program, which, by the way, for some reason, it was apparently very difficult to find by many clubs. We have had cases of clubs that were running for 4 or 5 months, and they didn't really know that there was an educational program with a set of projects that had to be done in order. Again, which is a pity, and that's our fault. It's not really their fault. If the information is not clear, that's something that we need to fix on the wiki. If you're a club officer, again, your area of interest and the information that you should be readily available to you is here. And if you're interested in starting an Agora club, then you have this particular part, which is dedicated or devoted to club founders specifically, how to start a club. Once you start a club, what the first step should be, how to become an Agora ambassador if you want to, etc. And then in general, for people that want to explore further, we have the advanced topics. That includes areas such as mentoring, contests, library with a lot of resources, etc., and how to help us, because we are all open to help. Now, going into the details, I want to highlight that now we have a clear separation between meeting activities and meeting roles, because before it was a bit of a mess. We had in the agenda, you would see some parts that were clearly activities, like the hot questions section that involved the hot questions master and a hot questions evaluator. But then you would see some parts that mentioned the role, like grammarian or grammarian report. And it was a bit of a mess, especially because with the addition of some more sophisticated sections like crossfire, colloquium, etc., the distinction became clearer. And this also tries to address a very common question, which is, what do I do in a meeting, especially if I'm a new club? But even not only for new clubs. Now with this, we hope that it's a bit clearer and that you have like a skeleton from which to build the agenda for your meeting, and mixing and matching sessions the way you want. So you start with a basic, let's say, template for the things that are required, the minimum things that are required in a business, in a meeting, like an introduction, a set of evaluators, and a closure. And then in the main part of the meeting, you can add whatever sections you like, depending on your goals. Who decides what activities should be going into each club meeting? Well, that's the job or the task of the Vice President of Education, because he or she are the ones that charter or plan the education of the club as such. And once the Vice President of Education has decided that, okay, in the next meetings, we're going to have this agenda, these kinds of agenda, this structure, these activities, then it becomes the task of each of the meeting leaders for the specific meeting to organize that agenda for that meeting, chasing members, offering them roles, seeing who is more suitable for which role, etc. One thing that you can also see here, and this is something that we have in the detail of every activity, is what are the time boundaries usually of every activity. So for example, the thought of the day is 2 to 4 minutes. The crossfire usually lasts for 20 minutes. The colloquium may last up to 40 minutes. And this allows also the Vice President of Education, depending on the allotted time for each meeting, to select the sections that they consider more interesting. Now, if we go to any activity, one of the things that is also clarified is the flow of the activity, because there were many doubts about how to go, how to perform a particular activity. It was never clear whether the evaluator should speak first and then the leader of the section comes and then we have the evaluation, or what happened within a section. And that was, a lot of that was left to improvisation, especially in the timing department. So now, for example, for the hot questions section, it is made a lot more explicit what should be the flow of the activity. So for example, the hot questions section starts with the hot questions evaluator that explains the objectives of the activity. I mean, why do we do hot questions at all? What is the purpose of the section? Which is especially important because we were, again, getting a lot of feedback from new members that they were, even when they attended the meeting, they were overwhelmed. They didn't understand what was happening in the meeting. And that was because many of the sections lacked an explanation of why they were there, what those sections were trying to achieve. And I'm not talking only about the hot questions section, but also timer, grammarian, why do we do that? Body language evaluator, listening evaluator, what's the purpose of those roles? So with this, we aim to guide new clubs, especially in terms of how to organize the activity. And you will see that for each of these, let's say, parts of the activity, there is a very specific timing indicated. Of course, this is only a guidance for clubs that are already experienced. You can configure the timings as you see fit to suit your type of meeting. But if you're a club that has recently charted or are just starting, we recommend that you stick to this recommendation. So for example, let's see if I manage to finish. The hot questions evaluator opens the hot questions section by explaining why it exists and speaks for up to 2 minutes. Then the hot questions master leads the section for up to 15 minutes. And during that time, he picks members of the audience or victims or volunteers, whatever you want to call them, usually between 3 and 10. That's an indication also how many questions you need to prepare. And each of them speaks for between 1 and 2 minutes. And then finally, the hot questions evaluator provides an evaluation for the speakers and the hot questions master. You will see also that now in the activities themselves, it is explained whether some roles are required or some roles are, or whether those roles are optional. So for example, obviously the hot questions master is a required role for the hot questions section, but there are other roles like the body language evaluator, the critical thinking evaluator, etc., and photographer, videographer, that are optional. And this is also especially visible in the analytical team, which usually in most clubs consists only the timer and the grammarian. But you can add so many other, let's say, evaluators to focus on different parts of the experience of speaking and leading, and to provide a much more, let's say, a 360-degree feedback for the participant. Again, they are indicated here as required or optional depending on the circumstances. You can also see that for each activity, you have whether this is a basic or a more advanced activity. So for example, there are some activities like Crossfire that are intermediate level. They are not recommended for clubs that have just chartered because they have a complex dynamics and they require time to master. One thing I want to draw your attention to as well is to the introduction of a couple of new roles, or more than a couple actually, that are, let me switch instead to the view of all the meeting roles, which you will see that has changed as well. Now it is divided in several sections: basic meeting roles, advanced meeting roles, and then specific roles for some very specific activities like contests or debates and colloquiums. For each of the roles, you have again an estimation of how difficult it is, which is there to provide some guidance to new members on whether they should try to tackle that role immediately, or maybe they should have more experience before attempting it. So for example, a meeting leader is an intermediate level role. You need to have some experience in the club before attempting to be a meeting leader. But instead, for example, being a timer, being a grammarian, being a prepared speech speaker is a basic level, and anyone could do it. And it also gives you an estimation of how much preparation time you should expect to spend preparing that role before the meeting. And as you can see, well, a good speech may require up to 3 hours, and that's sometimes even quite an underestimate. And how much actual speaking or active participation time you should expect in that role during the meeting itself. Now, one of the things I'm also particularly excited is what I mentioned before about providing you tools so that you can generate your own club assets without having any tools installed or any software or any experience in that. Let me go quickly to the index page. And let's see that, for example, in action in the educational program. Hopefully now the basic educational path is much easier to find. And the educational program itself, which hasn't changed at all, it should be much easier to navigate. So now you have the complete structure of the projects of every path. Here you can easily navigate between projects, and this also puts to rest the final discussion or debate that was, which is the first project? Is the first project where you have to be timer grammarian, or is it the speaking about the things I like project? Well, the first project is the first project, and the only special thing about it is that what you have to do during the first project is being either a timer or a grammarian, but it is a project in itself. Obviously, this is only for very shy people that are very nervous, that have a lot of problems speaking in public. So even being a timer or a grammarian is already quite an achievement for them. But obviously, many people just began at project number 2, which is speaking about the things that you like. Now, every project, as always, has their own evaluation card. And this is where it gets interesting, because before you downloaded a generic evaluation card, again, the design sucked big time, but it was what we had at the beginning. Now things are getting much better, and this is, let's say, a sign of the things to come, because we're going to do a lot more in this direction. So here you just, well, you have to prove that you are human, because this is a, let's say, computationally intensive activity, what's going to happen now, and we don't want to get bombarded by spurious random requests. You select for which part of the project you want the evaluation card, whether this is only the second project, so it only has one part, which is the speech delivery itself. But as you know, in the advanced projects, you have to do a speech analysis and then a speech delivery, so there are 2 parts. And for some projects, there are even 3 parts with a Q&A section at the end. You introduce your club number, and you just click here, and this will generate a complete personalized, let me switch the screen, evaluation card that is tailored to your club. As you can see, you don't need to do anything. It already has your club details, it already has your club logo, and it features the goals of the project and all the questions that were before. And the timing is here, so basically you can print it out and hand it to the evaluator, and that's maybe on the timer, and that's all they need to know. Where do we get these things from? The club logo and the club details. Well, if you have registered your club recently using the online form, then you probably remember that there is a part where you can upload your logo and your meeting schedule and your contact details. Well, we used all that information from the database to create this evaluation card. Now, if you are a veteran club that has been running on for years maybe, and you're registered in a bit of an ad hoc way, obviously we don't have that information, no problem. Just send us a message. We'll send you a link to the form, and you can upload all of that. A bit later in the future, we will have finally, hopefully, an online platform where you will be able to update that information yourself. And one more thing I would like to point is that now, not only the educational paths, but also the roles themselves have evaluation cards. This is important because evaluations for roles like timer, grammarian, hot questions master, etc., were all over the place. People were providing all sorts of feedback, but especially for new clubs, they were lacking guidance as to, okay, how do I evaluate a grammarian? What is a grammarian? What is a good grammarian supposed to do? How do I evaluate a timer? How do I evaluate evaluators, etc.? So now, for example, if we go to any of those roles, the grammarian, the timer, the meeting leader, at the bottom, again, you have the same form. You type your club number, and it generates an evaluation card that is specifically, let me share the new window, for the grammarian. Again, it's personalized with the logo of your club and your meeting details. This will improve, hopefully, the quality of the feedback that people in those roles get, because despite the fact that they are considered many times accessory roles, they are important roles and they teach important skills, especially in terms of focusing and delivering a task with quality. Speaking of which, I would like to draw your attention as well to a couple of 3 new roles that are, whose goal is to relieve a bit the task of the general evaluator, because the meeting evaluator was basically evaluating everything that happened in a meeting. The room, in the case of the online meetings, whether the link was shared properly, the facilitator, the meeting leader, the timer, the grammarian, a lot of things. And it was becoming impossible for anyone doing the meeting evaluator to provide in 6 minutes any decent feedback on any of the roles. And it was usually becoming a rushed role or a role that went out of control in terms of time. So now we have the general evaluator of feedback, general evaluator of speeches, and the critical thinking evaluator that can focus on specific areas of the meeting, so that the meeting evaluator really only evaluates the meeting as such and the accessory roles like timer, grammarian, etc. The general evaluator for feedback, his or her task is evaluating only evaluators, nothing more. And the general evaluator of speeches, his or her task is evaluating only those speeches that have not been evaluated already. So for example, prepared speeches are outside of his scope because each prepared speech has already their own specific evaluator. But with the addition of new activities and new roles, there were more and more speaking roles, like thought of the day, like today we travel to, like speeches in speech writing, like speeches during colloquiums, like speeches during debates, like speeches during crossfire, that weren't getting any feedback from anyone. And the last man standing, so to say, was the poor meeting evaluator who had to evaluate all of that at once. And it was just impossible. So especially if you start adding other sections that are non-traditional, let's put it that way, or that are new to you, it is a good idea to start thinking about those roles. So that, for example, the person that is doing the thought of the day or that is doing the today we travel to section gets quality feedback and not just like a footnote in the general evaluator, in the general evaluation that the meeting evaluator provides. And finally, one last thing I wanted to share with you is a great idea that came originally from the Singapore club, where they have these, what they call Agora notes. And let me just open one of them so that you can see what I'm talking about. And let me as well make sure I'm sharing the right window so that you can see it. And an Agora note is basically a speech, a prepared speech that was delivered at the club meeting, except that it has been edited professionally. And it also has this professional design created by Casey Chen, who, by the way, you may already know because he also created those fantastic Zoom backgrounds with the Agora logo that we are using all over the place. But in short, it makes it look as if it was a magazine or a newspaper article. And this is such a fantastic idea for promoting not only the club, because it features the club's information and the foundation as a whole, but also because it is a great promotional vehicle for the speaker himself or herself. It provides his or her contact information and a short biographical snippet. So I'm very happy that Casey agreed to do this very same thing on an international level. And we're going to have these Agora notes for members worldwide. And we're going to be selecting the best speeches delivered at clubs, which, by the way, is also an encouragement for members to do these great speeches and to progress along the educational program. And this is everything for now that I wanted to share with you. As always, I think, yes, I failed miserably at trying to keep it short and concise. I definitely could have benefited from a timer. As always, we are super open in terms of feedback, criticism, ideas, suggestions, comments that something is not working, that something sucks terribly. Please do send us those kinds of things, because at the end of the day, that's the only way we can improve. And also, if you are available or if you have expertise in any area in which we can use your skills, like design, for example, the website and the wiki could definitely benefit from a better design, or programming or marketing or content creation. We're more than happy to have your help. I hope all the new things, which are only the beginning of more new things that are planned and we are finally deploying, I hope that you like them. I hope that they are useful. And as always, thank you for being in Agora. I hope it's educational and it helps you speak, lead, and make history.